Alright, so there you go, that's everything I submitted for this year's application. I'm just going to give a bit of background on where I'm coming from. So last year I was accepted into Seneca College's animation program and fell short of the 2021 Sheridan cutoff by 1% or 2%. Of course, like anyone would be, I was a little disappointed, but decided to take the opportunity that Seneca presented because I would like to emphasize that Seneca does not have a bad animation program. It's a very prominent and recognized program, and majority of, if not all of its professors, are current working industry professionals outside of their teaching job, and despite it being a 3-year program as opposed to 4, you still learn a lot with the exact same assets and technology, trust me. I'll gladly be completely transparent and say that I actually used a handful of school assignments in this portfolio because, again, Seneca's animation program is far more than adequate when it comes to preparing its students and presenting industry opportunities. It has a ton of connections to major animation industry related events and people, and I know it's often viewed as a second choice, which is fair considering how much longer Sheridan's been around, but I don't want anyone to feel like they're stuck with it in the event of not getting into their quote-unquote personal top school. Seneca's name is out there and well known in the field, it has notable connections, and not to mention, it is in the perfect location. I'm gonna miss the super easy TTC access to downtown Toronto. They're so good. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, you're probably wondering, if you're hyping up that school so much, then how can you apply to Sheridan again? Well, originally, after the first few months at Seneca, I wasn't actually planning on reapplying at all because I felt very comfortable with what I had going on and was totally fine with the idea of finishing my schooling there. But it's probably a known fact that acceptance into Sheridan straight out of high school isn't overly common, at least for that program, and it's more typical for people to get in on their second try. I didn't want to be asking myself what if for the rest of my life in the event of choosing to leave it, so that being said, I begrudgingly paid my OCAS and assessment fee one more time and started working on a newish portfolio while doing college on the side, which I was initially very worried about, but you'll find out the way I was able to do things, it honestly turned out fine and I had a lot of extra time to get in. So, get ready for this walkthrough and some of my hot takes. Figures. There is nothing to say about this section aside from practice constantly. First semester, I did life drawings from Monday to Thursday for at least 45 minutes every day, but I kind of fell out of that during winter break, which kind of sucked, but it turned out alright in the end. My thoughts on these figures are, they're okay. I like this one here a lot. I tried to choose figures that show movement and variety to an extent. I know I used all females because I don't know about you, but even as someone who primarily draws males in my regular time, male life drawings are way harder for some reason. A lot of them are like rectangles and it's hard to find flow, so I opted for ladies because I know I feel more confident in them. So don't worry about that technicality, just choose your best work. For the short poses, you want to capture the gesture and movement and energy of the pose, whereas for the long poses, it's that plus elaborating on anatomy even further. Everyone has different approaches, but for me, and this is typically how it's taught as well, I start out sort of with the gesture and landmarks of the pose and body, and then gradually I build it up from there. So for example, the head and the neck position, angle, the shoulders and pelvis are tilted on, knees, ribcage, etc. And you want good and interesting line quality as well, more bold for things that are closer to the theoretical viewer, and for areas that have more energy. I'm gonna leave that one to you. It's like a feeling thing. And flex the fact that you know the definitions of where muscles insert and where bones poke out too if you can, like the ridge of the scapula or collarbones, where the tibia and fibula poke out on the ankles, the curve of the deltoid or calves or definition in the quads. You don't need to be a vocabulary connoisseur, but at least know surface level stuff so you actually understand what you're working with. Like, you want to know what you're drawing and why it works like that. And do these traditionally. You will be using Conte and newsprint at any life drawing class worth its salt, so practice getting a hang of using the stake and controlling your line quality and making interesting lines to further enhance the appeal and flow of your figures. It's worth it, and it can be really fun, I promise. It's just a bit of a learning curve at first. Hands. So I just reused these guys from last year because the same prompt, and even I got 1 point less, but that's fine, I'm okay with this. I do feel they're a little stiff, but I do like them. In my mind, I aim to have poses that showed both the front and back of the hand. I don't know how important that is, but I thought to try and demonstrate both sides. As for the cliche blue Prismacolor, it does work nicely for a thoughtful sketch, and then going over it with graphite does look pretty cool. Like figures, I highly recommend you do these traditionally, or in the very least, in a way that looks traditional. Become acquainted with anatomy. You should be doing this for life drawing proportions as well, at the very least. So, like, okay, from the carpals and the wrist, it transitions into the metacarpals, and then make up the body of the hand, and then the fingers have X amount of joints, and pay attention to the relationships between angles, especially with the number of fingers and knuckles. Messing up how long or short or high or low a joint is will fuck up your entire hand and make it look very uncanny. So, character rotation, I used this one from my final character design assignment in semester 1 at Seneca. Notice the ellipse thingy at the bottom. She is not there for aesthetic or trying to make things look legit. I used it legitimately to track where the feet are planted, and this really helps ground your character. Everything projects this energy upward, and if your foot placement is fucked up, then there goes the rest of your character with it. I used Clip Studio's animation timeline feature to be able to flip through all my views, which is very, very, very helpful because you can actively see everything move around and pinpoint anything that's out of place and fix it right there. Also, I need to make this very, very, very clear. Your character exists in a three-dimensional space, and they are made of volumes, and those volumes will change depending on their position in the planes of perspective that they reside in. I see so many people use that method where they just draw lines across all 4 of their turnaround poses to track like what height the fingertips are, the length of the shirt, the angle of the shoulders, and they make it consistent throughout all the views. While technically that can work, it's objectively wrong when your character, again, exists in a 3D space. There will be a horizon line where yes, positions will be consistent across all views, but as you go below or above that line, the heights, and to an extent sizes as well, of particular things will slightly change. So see the ellipse she's standing on? Imagine that's the bottom of a cylindrical tube that she's encased in. Depending on where something is in relationship to the horizon line, various landmarks will be rotating in correspondence with the perimeter of the ellipse because she's rotating in a circular motion. She's not facing you dead on, completely flat, and therefore will not follow a straight line completely when rotating. Hopefully this, hopefully this shows what I mean a little bit clearer. Anyway, that's my primary piece of advice in this category. Before I did the head rotation assignment at Seneca, which basically hammered that into my brain, I tried so hard to do it the other way, and shit looked so goddamn weird, and my poses were struggling so badly because they just never looked totally right. Like, there was always some weird warping going on, and it was just a constant battle with the character. But yeah, there's that. Anyway, aside from that aspect, design-wise, keep it simple. Don't even imagine. Like, in your mind, you are going to animate this character and draw it hundreds and hundreds of times over, frame by frame. Is that zipper really worth it? Do we really want to include that useless pocket? This is a call out to myself. You see that stupid little line there? I didn't need that. Ditch the shoelaces. As long as a general quote-unquote occupation, whatever that may be, and personality is potent, you're all set. It's all about the appeal and overall rationality and applicableness of the design. Of course, there are definitely some like super incredible, insane, and detailed designs that get great marks in other portfolios, which is fine. If you want to do that, like, go ahead. But don't feel like you need to come up with something super intricate for it to be successful. Having more lines does not equal more marks. So, animation. Funny story with her. With the USB, I automatically thought that it would be fun to use that string as, like, you know, some sort of Spider-Man web slinging moment. So I tried working on that, had the beginning and end, but getting the actual swing part was kind of tough. So coincidentally, around the exact same time, one of my animation assignments was just to do a frame-by-frame analysis of animation from something, and I coincidentally chose to do that scene from Into the Spider-Verse where Peter and Miles were swinging through that forest, and I realized I could use that analysis to aid in my depiction of a very similar motion, and I was able to reference and make note of how the animators for that handled their spacing and poses so I could interpret it in a way that would work for this USB. I'm very pleased with how it came out. I think the fact the swing itself was so convincing made up for the fact my volumes were definitely off a little bit. That said, you need to flex your understanding of animation principles. I'm not going to explain those, you go have fun with that. Have an antic, have your action, have your recovery, and then just spice it up with some personality. Okay, storyboard. For this one, really hard to say. Storyboard, yeah, always hit or miss with storyboard. Establishing shot, basically just have clear elements of storytelling. You want a beginning, the conflict, well, whatever, resolution, etc. And again, simplicity without explaining. It's very important that your audience shouldn't need an explanation of what's going on to understand the story. Also, flex some interesting camera angles that help emphasize whatever you're trying to get across and add drama. Make sure your dude's on model too. This is me, I personally did not practice drawing this thing beforehand. I kind of just got right into it, but whatever you feel most comfortable with. Character acting and clear silhouettes is also very important. Honestly, in storyboard class, this part usually tended to leave my mind, and that's probably why I got docked some marks here as well. As you can see, I was able to get away with drawing the fox fairly small for half the thing, which is whatever. Like, it works for the story that I'm trying to tell, but some people's preferences as to how they'd want to see stuff is usually always very different, and that's just how it is. Anyway, some of my closer, larger poses are a little overlapped in a way that would be confusing, so there's that. Like, their silhouettes aren't super explicit and could probably be pushed way more. Also, make sure expressions are, wow, expressive, have fun, and push those. I added in values also just because I felt like, you know, it made stuff a bit more legible and easier on the eyes. Sometimes it can be confusing, at least for me. I always tend to have a lot of stuff going on it's a lot of traffic and I don't need to do that. You don't have to render stuff out, like probably don't do that, but make sure it's very clean. Foreground elements, just like layout more thick than the background elements. I probably could have gotten rid of those rocks on the shoreline in the first panel because they're frivolous and contrast with the characters a little bit. But yeah, this section, again, like I said, hit or miss. This year's marking was really, really tough on boards. So I'm very satisfied that I got a 16. I'm totally fine with that. Okay, layouts. Not gonna lie, I really like these. I'll tell you what I did for them. So in school, our professor had us write up a fake pitch, before we even got to thumbnailing, which basically entailed about a 200-ish word blurb that described the general scene, its vibes, atmosphere, personality, etc., along with a handful of reference images for various things. Like anything, everything that you could possibly think of that's relevant. It's like world building almost, and it legitimizes the concepts in your head in a way that makes the ultimate layout more familiar and tangible for you. Like, you have specific things to reference in your writing before you even start conceptualizing. You don't need to include everything that you write in your final layout. I ignored a lot of stuff later on because I simply just didn't want to draw it or was running short on time, but it's super helpful with immersing yourself in the world that you eventually want to create. So here's an excerpt from my interior. So like, it's like that. I highly recommend doing this, or at least attempting this, even if it's like 50 words, just make something. For last year's portfolio, as well as an exterior that I attempted to make before using the school assignment, I went in blind and they just felt so less grounded and were almost lacking intention in a way. So creating a connection to what you're working with is so important, and doing this pitch does just that because it like syncs you up with the picture you want to make, if that makes sense. Anyway, yeah, for interior, use your perspective rulers and create a nice candid scene that tells a story, guide the viewer's eye to the most important things. Like, the interior isn't very good for that, but the exterior, you can see the curves of the mountains. They point toward the tent and Stan and Kyle. Speaking of Stan and Kyle, I will be talking about this more in the personal section, but forming a connection with the work you want to create can also mean loosely basing it off of something that's already existing, if that's your thing, like South Park, for example. I always try to incorporate parts of myself and what I like into my work whenever I can, which basically means referencing franchises or series that I like, so don't be afraid of taking inspiration from pre-existing content. This camp scene is literally contrived of various photos of Colorado that I gathered, and then to top it off, because the theme for the assignment was a campsite, I literally made it a South Park pseudo-fan art because I could. It made me enjoy the process way more too, because technically I was working with material that I already knew and loved, and finding new ways to express the characters' personalities and how they'd interact with the setting. That was fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. As for my interior, I primarily took inspiration from this Egyptologist that I follow on Instagram because she has this super cool style and I highly respect the work she does. Easy as that. Obviously, don't straight up copy a pre-existing space. Like, come up with something and construct something original because they want to see how well you understand design and appeal and layout principles. So outside of the technical perspective realm of layout, find ways to further integrate yourself and your personality too, so you're even more engaged with the foundation and the end result. Also, on topic, my character turnaround, I made her just after I saw the new Bond film, and I very intentionally made her with some like 00 agent vibes in mind, which was fun because I was into that genre at the time, and is probably why it turned out in a way that I'm still very pleased with how it looks now. I wanted it to look good because I wanted to do Bond justice, you know, like psychology. It works in very great ways sometimes. So, personal work. I have a lot to say about this section. First of all, again, like my hands, I reused some pieces, like my sketchbook pages, because I sure as fuck would not have time to do ink and watercolor spreads this time around. Secondly, you will clearly see my personals are chock full of fan art. There is lots and lots of stigma around fan art in college portfolios, and majority of applicants concur amongst themselves that fan art equals bad. Well, obviously, I entirely disagree. Nowhere does it say to avoid that. In fact, it tells you to show the work that you create for yourself, not anyone else. I am a fan artist who finds the most joy in depicting others' characters and narratives in a way that appeals to me, or can connect to the parent story, or putting my own spin on the characters and narratives in like an AU sense. I can come up with my own original stuff for sure, but it just does not appeal to me enough to want to do it regularly on my own time. It's not really interesting, nor lines up with my primary agenda. And if I force myself to do that and pump out work I don't even want to do for the sake of having something purely original, then it's soulless and lacking strong conviction and purpose, and therefore I'm not showcasing things that represent who I am as a unique and individual artist. That's basically what I did last year. I was so worried about whether I did my personals right or not, which is a little ridiculous. Confidence is super important, and you need to believe in the quality and originality of your own work and how that captures you as a creative person. You have something to offer that nobody else does. Don't try to mold yourself into something that you just naturally aren't. Anyway, I snuck in 1 or 2 pieces of fan art in my last one and edited some things so it wouldn't be instantly recognizable, to which I have to say who genuinely cares. Except also, I do have to say, I wouldn't submit something like iconic pop culture stuff. Like Batman is like, okay, come on. Or like something like Pokemon, you know? Try to be clever with it. But the rest was all stuff I came up with for the sake of the portfolio. Of course, those still had pieces of me embedded in it because I obviously made it, but there wasn't much substance to a lot of it aside from I need this for my personal section, which is dull and boring. This year though, I wasn't trying to be the perfect art school applicant, okay? I was going to entirely be myself and do things how I wanted to do them without any external influence that nudges me, implying what I technically should or should not do. I wanted to see where that would take me and if actually embracing my authenticity would make any difference, especially since I was already a Seneca, who I also got into with fan art in my personals 90s. This time I did, and I compiled things the way I personally thought was best, and clearly, presenting myself without any filter and giving admissions artwork, which just so happened to be fan art, that I genuinely enjoyed working on and gladly created on my own time, proved to be more successful than what I did before. Before submitting my final portfolio, I decided that this time, if I showed them work that actually genuinely and sincerely represented me as a person, things that I thought looked good regardless of the subject matter, and they didn't like it, then obviously I'd be better off at Seneca. But they did, and I'm grateful that the event where I decided to actually be myself with my personals and subject matter and all other categories of the portfolio was the one that whoever was marking my stuff obviously liked better. Anyway, quick walkthrough. I repeated this character sheet from last year because it was fun, looks good, and it suits the animation field with character exploration, as opposed to these portraits I was debating on submitting instead. Glad I didn't. Next, I don't know why I ended up having a Lord of the Rings theme, but I did, and it's kind of funny. I have this modern summer camp thing, AU lineup that I was working on last summer. I love modern AUs, and I love Lord of the Rings, and the summer vibes were great, and I had a blast working on the characters that I got done. I still have some more to go, sorry. This is docking off the character design element. Then film studies. One of my holy trinities here, Pirates, Lord of the Rings, and X-Men. I absolutely love film and studying composition and colors and literally everything that the director implements. And it's even more fun to draw them in your own style using fun brushes. I stated that they were film studies, as you can see, because, I don't know, obviously I did not come up with Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff, but I didn't want to play it off like I came up with the scene off the top of my head. Studies are also super constructive and encouraged for improvement as well. I remember I learned a lot regarding color and technique when I made these, and I included them because A, I really fucking like them, and B, it shows my own illustrative/digital painting skills. Now we have some zine pieces that I've done. These speak for themselves, both fan art too, but again, they have their own spin depending on what the theme of the zine was. I included these because they're full illustrations that tell a story and more or less have finished backgrounds, even though I could do way better now because I made these last year. Then yeah, sketchbook. This was kind of just to show subject and medium range and demonstrate more abstract and quick or less refined work that I can do. You do not need a sketchbook, but I find it's a very efficient way to show lots of things all in as one piece that are relevant to each other, of course. Quick studies, my own travels, anything rough that I liked. Then we have this little short film for this film festival that my high school did. Just for from a standout sense, try to include a lot of variety and mix up types of media within subject matter. That doesn't mean you need to do sculptures or oil painting or make a stop motion puppet. I just mean branch out from strictly 2D illustrative work if that makes sense for you. Hence my 2D animation. I cannot do 3D. I do not like doing 3D, so I'm not gonna force myself to do 3D. I'd suggest definitely trying to include some kind of animation, whether that's an animatic or whatever. By actually showing that you practice and go beyond what the whole program is all about, I feel like that already sets you apart. Aside from that, I think that maybe it would have been better for me if I included more standalone background layout viz dev work in my case. I tend to focus a lot on character-driven things, which isn't bad, but again, variety and range. I don't know how they evaluate this section, just try to be as comprehensive as possible. So that was my overview and thoughts on my 2022 Sheridan animation portfolio. I hope you're all able to find something helpful from my explaining my own personal experience and approaches to things. Don't take anything I say as complete law though. I am not someone who evaluates portfolios and I don't know how they do it. This is just how it worked for me. I'm so incredibly lucky to have been accepted into Seneca last year, and I'm forever grateful for my time spent there and the invaluable experiences and people I was able to meet that indefinitely contributed to building up my skill set even further for this portfolio and, more importantly, in general for career prospects. To future applicants, I wish you all good luck. Start early on things like life drawing and keep that effort consistent till the deadline. I know this all can seem very intimidating, and it absolutely is very stressful at times, but as long as you manage your time and pace yourself, you will make it through to the end and gain a ton of experience in the process, no matter what the outcome is. Thanks so much for sitting through all this. If you're still here, I plan on sharing any future videos, hopefully, or reels on this channel, so do what you want with that information. Also, feel free to comment or reach out on any of my socials if you have any other questions. I will try to get to those to the best of my ability. Once again, good luck, and stay diligent. You can do it. Okay, bye.